Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are talking about an event that absolutely sent shockwaves through the 3D animation and digital design world. Picture this. A team of top-tier 3D artists has just spent countless hours and literally millions of dollars developing a fully rigged, completely production-ready main character model. It is the absolute pinnacle of digital craftsmanship. But then, in a move that is basically unheard of in late-stage development, they didn't just tweak it. They didn't just slide it into an archive folder. No, they took this multi-million-dollar masterpiece, scrubbed it from their servers entirely, and permanently deleted it. We're talking about the original lost design of the now famous character, Ava Thompson. Today, we're uncovering those deleted files to see exactly why wiping this asset fundamentally changed the future of 3D character geometry forever.
Okay, let's dive into this by looking at the official PR spin versus the reality. When a studio trashes an asset of this magnitude, they gotta give a reason, right? The official public story was your classic creative differences and an aesthetic evolution. Sounds totally normal, just a standard production pivot. But internally, the real reason was vastly different. They didn't scrap her because she looked cheap or poorly made. Actually, scratch that, it was the exact opposite. The internal memo driving this deletion was essentially Error 403, audience rejection. The original model was simply too good at doing something a stylized character should absolutely never ever do. It systematically attacked the human psyche.
Which brings us to the central mystery of this whole explainer. Why delete a multi-million-dollar masterpiece? Why take something with so much financial and technical backing, a model literally ready to be put in front of the cameras, and totally wipe it out? What could possibly cause such an immediate visceral rejection from test audiences that the studio felt they had no choice but to bury it? Well, to figure that out, we have to look closely at what this thing actually was, and the specific design philosophies that brought it to life in the first place. Let's jump right into Section 1, the Beta Ava prototype.
The Beta Ava prototype was built on this deeply ambitious hybrid design philosophy. Basically, the studio wanted to have their cake and eat it too. You can see a massive conflict here. On one hand, you've got this mandate for high-end, hyper-realistic skin and fabric simulation. We're talking sweeping, medical-grade realism. But on the other hand, her skeletal structure featured wildly exaggerated, stylized anime proportions. When we look at the reconstructed visual details of this beta model, the contrast is super jarring. Take her tech goggles, for example. They were hyper-detailed, but instead of being round and inviting, they had these aggressive, hard industrial angles. On paper, mixing gritty realism with anime proportions probably sounded like a visionary visual masterpiece.
In practice, though, it was a psychological disaster. When you combine hyper-realistic human skin textures, they even had the subsurface scattering of light under the skin in these tiny micro-wrinkles, and you pair that with massive, stylized cartoon eyes, a literal short circuit happens in the viewer's head. The human brain completely stops processing the character as a cute cartoon. Instead, it flags her as a biological anomaly. The textures are screaming at your brain, this is a real human, while the proportions are screaming, this skull structure is completely impossible. So your brain interprets the character as a severe, unsettling defect. It basically plunges the whole design straight into the deepest trench of the uncanny valley.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the actual audience feedback. When test audiences were brought in to watch the very first 3D motion tests of the Beta Ava design, their feedback had absolutely nothing to do with the storyline, the lighting, or the pacing of the scene. Instead, viewers consistently reported experiencing a distinct, subconscious sense of dread. Just watching the character move filled them with a terrifying, visceral unease. They couldn't quite explain the complex geometry of why it was happening, but they knew for sure they just wanted to look away. Which brings us to Section 2, the geometry of discomfort. The true horror really kicked in when the model actually started talking, exposing a massive technical scandal. What we're looking at here is a facial rigging map. Think of this as the digital skeleton, the underlying system of bones and muscle joints that dictate how a 3D face moves and expresses emotion. Because the original design demanded this incredibly intricate, realistic facial geometry on top of a highly stylized head shape, standard rigging constraints completely fell apart. The technical animators had to pack the rigging joints so incredibly tight, they were just chaotically crowded around her massive stylized mouth and eyes, all in a desperate attempt to force the mesh to form words naturally. To really grasp this technical nightmare, we need to focus on the nasolabial fold, the smile lines. In the original model, when Ava smiled or spoke, the way the digital skin bunched up and folded was mathematically correct for a real human being, but it was geometrically impossible for her exaggerated skull shape. To make that massive mouth move, the surrounding cheek geometry was stretched incredibly thin. This overextension caused the hyper-realistic texture maps underneath to drastically distort. The result? These terrifying micro-jitters rippling across her face every single time she expressed an emotion. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact workflow loop that doomed the entire project. This wasn't just an aesthetic failure that made people uncomfortable, it was a total production black hole. Step 1. The model tries to speak or emote naturally. Step 2. The hyper-realistic skin geometry literally tears its own visual logic apart, stretching and micro-jittering because the skull shape simply can't support realistic muscle movements. Step 3. Technical animators are forced to spend hundreds of hours doing manual vertex correction shot by shot, just to make it look barely acceptable. This pipeline was utterly unsustainable. The character was literally breaking the animation software from the inside out. Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 3, the new golden rule.
So when the studio finally bit the bullet, permanently deleted the multi-million-dollar Beta Ava, and rebuilt her from absolute scratch, they applied this brand new rulebook. The core philosophy became all about unifying the design language. First off, they stripped away all those hyper-realistic skin pores and medical-grade dermal details. Second, they took those aggressive, hard industrial angles on her goggles and rounded them out, making them softer and way more inviting. And finally, instead of relying on sweeping medical realism to make her look tangible, they anchored her stylized proportions with highly controlled, intentional grit. We're talking subtle details, like a little fabric lint on her clothes or localized scuff marks on her gear. It added texture without setting off those biological alarm bells in our brains.
So the crucial point is this massive realization the studio had. Believability is completely different from realism. You simply cannot anchor a stylized silhouette with uncontrolled, medical-grade realism. They clash on a fundamental psychological level. By ditching the hyper-realism and replacing it with unified, harmonious design cues, the studio proved that you don't need a character to look exactly like a real human for the audience to believe in them. Believability is all about internal harmony. The rules of the character's physical design and the world they live in just have to make sense together.
Ultimately, the original Ava Thompson wasn't deleted out of spite or because of budget cuts. She was deleted so the final character could actually live. Burying that deeply unsettling, hyper-realistic prototype was the exact sacrifice needed to get the flawless, beautifully balanced final character we all recognize today. It stands as a profound masterclass in knowing when to kill your darlings for the sake of the project, even if those darlings cost millions of dollars and represent incredible technical achievements. Because sometimes, the most advanced technology is the exact thing holding the art back. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The next time you watch the final version of Ava, or really any other flawlessly designed 3D character, seamlessly navigating a scene, perfectly balanced and full of life, take a second to look a little closer. What unsettling digital ghosts, what terrifying prototypes that were just too disturbing to exist, might be hiding in the deleted code underneath those smooth curves? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this completely changes the way you look at digital design forever.